So you like wine. Yes, it's fun, it's exciting, of course intoxicating, but it can be confusing, complicated, especially when we talk about Italian wines. So what is on the store shelves, on the restaurant wine list? What are the Italian wines in America? Well, my name is Stephen, and I'll be your guide. I live and work in an Italian neighborhood in St. Louis called The Hill. We've been given unprecedented access to the wine room at Charlie Gito's on The Hill. Well, welcome to the wine room. Today we are going to be discussing the wines of Tuscany. Now, Tuscany is a region in central Italy, very famous for a number of things. The Italian Renaissance, Italian literature. It is a destination location for many American tourists. Florence, Siena. But what's important wine-wise? Well, let's start with the whites. Now, there are some international varietals being grown in Tuscany. Certainly, there's some Chardonnay, there's some Pinot Grigio. But what is typically Tuscan is Vernaccia di San Gimignano. San Gimignano is a medieval town. The grape is Vernaccia. And this fits our typical profile of a central Italian white wine. So we are looking at medium intensity. We have medium plus acid, medium alcohol, medium complexity, medium body, medium finish. Definitely easy drinking. Fruits are citrus with lemons and limes. Slight white flower. Definitely earth-driven, but definitely nice summertime white wine to sit outside and enjoy all things Tuscan. For red wines in Tuscany, this is about Sangiovese. Tuscany is all about red wines, and it's all about Sangiovese. And most famous is going to be Chianti. Now, Chianti can be somewhat complicated. First of all, you have your basic Chianti, where the words just say Chianti. We're going to call this Chianti Normale. Now, Chianti Normale tends to be a lighter style, a more fruitier style, a more easy drinking style. Chianti Classico is the most historically significant and also, we think, the most significant quality-wise as well. In recent times, Chianti Classico has eliminated the option of being able to produce a Chianti Normale or a Chianti Superiore from that zone. So this is making Classico even a more serious wine than it already is. When aged long enough, it could be called Riserva. Other subzones in Chianti, for the most part, they make lighter styled wines. For example, Colli Argentini, Colli Fiorentini. One subzone that rivals the quality and robustness of Classico is Rufina. Now, please do not confuse Chianti Rufina with the producer Ruffino, which is a producer of Chianti Classico. Other Sangiovese, Vino Nobile from Montepulciano. So please, it is confusing. Do not confuse the town of Montepulciano, for which we have Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, with the grape Montepulciano, which is found all over central Italy, especially on the Adriatic coast. Vino Nobile, very similar to what we see in Chianti Classico, also of high quality, aged for a year longer for Normale and for the Riserva than what you see compared to Chianti Classico. Typically a very good buy on restaurant wine lists. Another Sangiovese. Now we're in the south of Tuscany in the province of Grosseto, around the town of Scansano for Morellino di Scansano. This is another Sangiovese. it's warmer in Grosseto, and the fruit is more ripe, the wine is more lively. Also, wine's more reasonably priced than what you see compared to, say, Chianti Classico and Vino Nobile. Brunello di Montalcino. Probably the finest expression of Sangiovese that you will find. From the province of Siena, around the town of Montalcino, this is 100% Sangiovese. Yes, we know the stories that you've read in the paper and on the internet as well, that maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but 100% Sangiovese, aged for 4 years, 5 years for Reservas. Where in Montalcino these grapes are sourced does affect the taste to some extent. Wines that are sourced from the north side of Montalcino, for example, Altesino, more structurally interesting, relatively higher in acid, higher in tannin, as wines sourced from the south of Montalcino, for example, Il Poggione, more aromatically interesting, more perfumed, but always, always extremely high quality red wines, some of the best red wines produced in Italy. So you say, what about super-tuscans? Now, in these series of videos, we haven't really spoken much about classifications, but for super-tuscans, we have to. About 40 years ago, there were some extremely fine and extremely expensive wines being produced out of Tuscany that did not fit the then Italian classification system. They were labeled as Vino di Tavola, which is in the lowest grade for Italian classifications. We need to draw an analogy to France and Bordeaux, which has had the same classification system since 1855. So here in the 21st century, wines that are overperforming what their classification from 150 years ago say are often termed super seconds. Well, what about wines that were overproducing their classification system in Italy? They were termed super Tuscans. The two most famous and two original were Sassicaia and Tinignello. Now, Tinignello is produced out of Chianti Classico. And on the Tinignello estate, they actually have another wine, another super Tuscan called Solaia. Compositionally, they are inverses of each other. Tinignello is Sangiovese with some Cabernet. Solaia is Cabernet with some Sangiovese. Sassicaia is from the west coast in Livorno, in Bolgheri. Now, this is a Cabernet-based wine. Bolgheri is the zone for Bordeaux varietals in Italy: Cabernet, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. So, Sassicaia, Cabernet-based with some Cabernet Franc. Also, world-famous super Tuscan, Ornellaia, from Tenuta dell'Ornellaia, Cabernet and Merlot-based super Tuscan from Bolgheri. Also, from Tenuta dell'Ornellaia is Masseto. Masseto is a Merlot, probably the greatest Merlot in Italy and one of the greatest Merlots produced. Fantastic Bordeaux varietals out of Bolgheri. There have been essays written comparing the soils in Bolgheri with the soils in Bordeaux. Other super Tuscans in the region of Tuscany. So those which are the most famous, what about super Tuscans that are coming from the Montalcino area? These can be labeled as Sant'Antimo, and Banfi makes good use of that place of origin in the production of their more modern styled wines as well. This is Cum Laude. It is a modern styled blend. In the south of Tuscany, in Grosseto, you are more likely to see wines of this nature produced and labeled as Maremma, certainly as well as Toscana Rosso, which you see all over the region. But from the Maremma, we are typically talking about Sangiovese, Cabernet, and Merlot, maybe some Alicante as well. Tuscany is also the home to a very, very famous dessert wine called Vinsanto. Vinsanto is made in Chianti. It is made in Montepulciano. It is also made in the Montalcino area. This is a Vinsanto from Montalcino. Vinsanto is made primarily from Malvasia with some Trebbiano. And these grapes are dried as well. They are made from raisins, typically dried on mats. They tend to have a bit of an oxidized character to them, and they are mainstays as dessert wine pours in Italian restaurants. One special note, it is possible to have a red version of Vinsanto, and it's called the Eye of the Partridge, Orecchio di Pernice, and it's based on Sangiovese. Well, I hope that helps clear up some of the overlying confusion that you may find in many of these Tuscan red wines. But just one last thing. Remember that Toscano Rosso means that it can come from anywhere in Tuscany. And many of these things may be marketed to you as super-Tuscans. Super-Tuscan is a term that we'll leave for you to decide whether it's of the highest quality and oftentimes the highest price. Thank you, and I hope you check out some of these other videos as well. So we've come into my kitchen so I can show you in comparison and contrast some of these distinctly colored Italian reds. So in the big glass is a Chianti Classico. In my left hand here is a Pinot Noir. So if we look at the color concentrations, the concentrations are of a similar level. We see in the Chianti here, in the big glass, that it does fade more toward a garnet rim. However, you will find some Chiantis that fade to a lighter ruby as well. Pinot Noir, we see it fades to a lighter ruby or salmon rim, but also the Pinot Noir tends to be just that much brighter than the Sangiovese-based Chianti Classico. How does the Chianti compare to the much more richly colored Malbec from Argentina? Look at the intensity of the Malbec as it fades out to a really bright ruby rim as well, compared to the Chianti, which is based on Sangiovese in the big glass. Well, thank you once again.